You're listening to Two Chunks and a Hunk. Movie musings for mostly everybody. Hello and welcome to Two Chunks and a Hunk. My name is Jordan Wonders, and this week I am your chunk.
I'm Doge, and listen, you're not perfect, sport, and let me save you the suspense. This chunk you've met, she's not perfect either.
I'm Carter, and you're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're chunking about.
Oh, going with a verb. I'm the guest. I guess I'm the hunk, Dan Koch.
Yes, you are.
And you know, guys, trust is the most important thing in making a connection with a chunk.
Nice.
Phenomenal.
Nice. Very good. Now, Dan, I'm going to wag my finger at you already because you're the hunk, my friend.
Oh,
You are
what
the
did I say?
hunk. Chunk.
You said
But
chunk.
You know what? It all
in
sounds
real life,
the same.
In
Hey,
real
it's-
life, I'm the chunk. Yeah,
Dan, it's not your fault.
I'll
It's
enjoy
not
1
your
hour.
fault, man.
Well, it is, frankly. It's we're gonna get therapeutic here because it's Goodwill Hunting, and it's my self-soothing through unhealthy foods. It is my fault.
Yeah.
I was not abused. I was not stabbed by my foster dad. I just eat poorly and hate exercising. I meant to say that I'm the hunk. I guess that's a Freudian slip. There's another reference to therapy.
Hot start.
I am on fire tonight.
You're 2 in already.
Wow.
Dan, would you do me a huge favor and tell everybody listening who you are, what you do, what you love, right off the top?
Yeah. I'm Dan Koch. I am the host of the You Have Permission podcast, which is a podcast about progressive Christianity and the sciences, often psychological science, but sometimes other sciences. And I, a long time ago, played in a rock and roll band called Sherwood, and I am a grad student getting my doctorate in counseling psychology. That's me.
Phenomenal.
Wow.
And I love movies. Movies are my primary hobby as a person.
Wonderful.
I love that.
Wonderful.
Do you
Dan,
remember?
what's your...
So embarrassing.
Dan, what's your favorite movie of all time?
My favorite movie of all time is Almost Famous, specifically the director's cut, which is called Untitled.
Okay.
And there have been films that have, approached it maybe, but nothing's beat it.
I
That's
love
a good
that.
flick.
Love it. Amazing.
A couple others, just to give you a sense.
Please.
Moneyball, which is just like a perfect film. Disney's Robin Hood, the animated version.
Oh, we love Disney's Robin.
That's from the old, that's from the old country.
Yeah, sure.
And then Apocalypse Now, There Will Be Blood. This is,
yes.
I kind of stick with sort of like the film
Lighthearted, kind of fun
consensus.
stuff.
mostly dark films. Yeah.
That's great, man. So you'll fit perfectly right here with the movie that is closing out our what did we call it? Our Mark and Jack do therapy
Matt.
bad.
Yeah,
That's right.
Have a seat. Mark and Jack do therapy bad. I
This
think
is
is in it.
a sequence of films involving therapy. Is this my understanding? It's a
That's
series?
correct.
Okay.
To an
That's
extent,
correct.
yes,
Yeah, we
sir.
started with The Departed, Jack and Matt, and then we went to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Jack. Both terrible examples of therapists. And then now we have a slightly better version here, the final movie of the series, which we'll all attempt to say at the same time.
Ooh, let's see if we can get this synced up.
It'll be great, guys. I'm sure. It's called Goodwill Hunting. That's going to come out real clean. I love
Sure.
it.
Yeah, perfect. Easy.
Now, Doge, as always, what I need you to do here, buddy, is give me a synopsis.
I was hoping you'd ask me because I did pick one out on IMDb to read just for this moment.
Thank you
this
so much.
week's synopsis is written by Damien Saunders,
Damien.
whose IMDb username is dvs at rainbow.net. And I'm confident that's not a real email address. I don't think that would go anywhere if you tried
Maybe
to
we
email
should
this
bleep
person.
the URL just in case.
Actually, I'm going
Let's
to try
not
to send an
dox
email there.
Damien on accident.
Let's see what happens. Damien writes, a janitor at MIT, Will Hunting has a gift for math and chemistry that can take him light years beyond his blue-collar roots. But he doesn't realize his potential and can't even imagine leaving his childhood Boston South End neighborhood, his construction job, or his best friend. To complicate matters, several strangers enter the equation. A brilliant math professor who discovers, even envies, Will's gifts. An empathetic shrink who identifies with Will's blue-collar roots. And a beautiful, gifted pre-med student who shows him, for the first time in his life, the possibility of love.
It's actually a great synopsis.
That was a
Damien crushed it.
fantastic synopsis.
Damien knocked it out of the park here.
Damien really knows what's up.
I need to follow this guy. How do I get notifications of new synopsis on IMDb?
I thought you were going to say, how do you email him?
I was going to say, how do I get an email at rainbow.net?
Right?
I got to, I'll have whatever he's having, you know?
Please.
Absolutely.
No, I'm going to say right off the bat with Good Will Hunting, I was a little disappointed because there's not a whole lot of hunting in this movie.
God.
It's his last name, Jordan.
Okay. I'm
His last
back
name
on
is
track.
Hunting.
I'm back
Listen,
on track.
when-
Did you
I
know
like
that? Was that a bit?
That was a bit.
Okay.
Before we started recording, Jordan's like, I've got the perfect zinger that's going to just take all the air out of it. And I
That,
was
my
like,
exact
please-
words were, I'm going to take all the air out of this recording.
Please don't
so.
do that to our podcast, man.
You succeeded. And I played right into it like an idiot.
We
Like a
decided
child.
before we started that I am the LVP, the least valuable player on the pod. So it was important for me to take us
You're making
down.
the argument here.
No, this is it's obviously considered a classic by so many people, and it's always a little intimidating stepping into a conversation about a movie that is so well regarded and so widely regarded. I think it's almost a weird rite of passage for a movie podcast to talk about Good Will Hunting. It's a little crazy we're just now getting here, but do you all remember the first time you watched this movie? Because I came to it late.
I came to it late. I have a really funny story about the first time I watched
Well,
this movie.
please tell me.
The first time I watched this movie, my now wife, Jessica,
You
she-
miss a lot of it?
she turned me on to the idea of once you
Yeah,
go
she
through
did.
a breakup, once you go through a breakup, you watch a movie that you think will make you cry to get your breakup feelings out. I had
Completing
never
the stress cycle.
Right,
That's all that
exactly.
is.
Yeah. A little bit of emotional catharsis right there, right? So I
Yeah.
had never
Wow.
seen Good Will Hunting. I knew it had a reputation as I guess probably just capital M movie. Like it's one of those movies that's
Sure.
like, this is a grown-up movie. You know what I mean? And so I went through a breakup and I was like, I just need to watch something sad to get all my sad out. And I watched Good Will Hunting and I was like, this really isn't that sad and it's not helping me at all. And then completely fell apart at the it's not your
Sure.
fault part,
Yes.
right? Right? But that's the first time I
100%.
watched it on my iPad sitting on the couch at my parents' house.
Well, on your iPad, though.
Yeah, no, I didn't set myself up for success
Okay,
really
fair
at all.
enough.
That's not a good place to watch a movie.
I think I watched this with my parents when I was in high school, like junior or senior in high school. And done. You know, I think I've told the story before to where I saw, I think it was Tangled with my dad and mom, and my dad and I are the ones sobbing, and mom's like, get over it. But it was another one of those situations where, it was just, it stood in my brain. You know, Robin Williams feels like, I'm a 90s kid, so he feels like he's only playing the role he played for me
Yeah.
In life.
emotionally and
Sure.
spiritually for those, that decade that he was just doing everything. It's always had a special place for me.
I'm playing the genie in Aladdin.
Oh my gosh.
I would have seen it shortly after it came out. I was in high school when it came out, and I either saw it then or college, probably late high school. I just remember loving it the first time and being like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I don't remember much else about my first experience. I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times.
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely a rewatch worthy film. Nothing special about my first watch either. It was just, I'm glad I didn't watch it until college. I don't know that I would have been able to appreciate sort of the more complex emotional themes happening in the movie. I think I might have been bored by it when I was in high school, but it hit me at the perfect time, and it's something I have just really treasured ever since I watched it for that first time. It's a really special movie, and I don't know, even in coming up with this series, I feel like we struggled to come up with many movies with a positive view of therapy to begin with.
I think this is kind of an outlier, right? Because Will's therapist genuinely wants to help him and doesn't seem to want something from him in the way that like we talked about a couple weeks ago, like Vera Farmiga in The Departed doesn't really seem to be that altruistic of a counselor. We've got even folks like the counselor in Silver Linings Playbook, where it's like, he's just so manipulative to Bradley Cooper, right? This is like, I think the closest to a counseling experience that I would want to take part in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which seems like an outlier, right? It's hard to find.
We had a conversation, a few days ago too, about preparing to have this role of Sean as this counselor, and how even still it didn't really feel like the dynamic truly of having a counselor. But honestly, the dynamic that we get almost excuses itself a little bit to me in watching it, because this is an interesting situation. This is a friend of his recommending him to be. And so it almost felt like he had different rules, but still had the foundation of what made him a professional. And so it does create something. While it's the closest look I think we've had to actual sessions, it is, again, also a little bit fictional.
Sure.
I wrote a few things down about this aspect of the film.
Please.
I think it is, for the most part, once we get to Sean, to Robin Williams' character, it is a pretty accurate portrayal of the kind of therapy you might do with a client like Will. And it really does kind of valorize psychotherapy. A lot of the moves that he makes, like, when he says, now he's being kind of sarcastic when he says, well, it sounds like you got a really great plan. You can go through your life, and like, that's, you wouldn't probably normally be sarcastic to a client, but you would say back to them a version of what they're saying that they hear and go, well, I don't know that I want to do that. And that's actually a tactic called motivational interviewing, and it's really effective. People need to hear you agree with something that they don't quite believe, and then that helps them figure out that they don't believe it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, before they get to Sean, a couple nitpicks here.
Sure. Yeah, hit us.
The first guy would never call a client a loony or a crazy person, and certainly would not do that in the waiting room of the office.
Yeah.
You would maybe have a confidential conversation with Professor Lambeau. And then the second one, and this actually might be my least favorite thing in the movie, is that Professor Lambeau and the TA are in the hypnosis session.
Yeah, dude.
Wild.
And I know,
wild.
I realize why they did that. They did that so that when we get to Sean's office, Sean can say, you guys are out of here. And like, oh, so now we're already learning something, that Sean is like a real therapist or whatever. He's going to do good work. He's not going to be the lackey of Professor Lambeau. But that is just like extremely unethical to have other people in the room during a session. So that's my my least favorite thing. What's that called? My big dumps. What's it called?
Your super dump. Yeah.
My super dump.
the big one.
Yeah, the big,
like
my
a
big
big
super dump.
Yeah, think more Chipotle.
There's also there's a great moment in the film where Sean strangles Will, kind of, and kind of gets up in his face. That would be a very big mistake to make in real life.
Absolutely.
But the overall thing, and that quote, my joke quote of like, trust is the most important thing in making a connection with the client. That's true. We call that the therapeutic alliance. It does as much work as anything else you're going to do as a therapist. And they have been able to sort of approximate this through statistics of like, what percentage of a client's change is from what. And you're just having a good alliance with them. They trust you. You have good rapport, does more work than any specific thing about your work. Oh, I'm a psychoanalytic I'm a CBT guy. I'm a whatever guy. Or I disclose more, or I disclose less. All of that stuff is less important than just you have a good thing going with the client. And then that lets them process through stuff and change. And so that's just like one way of saying the kind of vibe they show between the two of them. It's fairly realistic with a client like that. And it is powerful like that. And I just loved that. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think that's great. And I think
eating this up right now.
Yeah,
I am loving this. So
I assume this was part of
much.
why you asked me on. Was to
Yes,
talk about,
absolutely.
Okay. All right.
This is
so
exactly it.
Because you're
I'm
smarter than us.
I'm training to be a psychologist, so that's probably the main thing. Whether or not I'm smarter than you. Although, Jordan, you're making the case for yourself as dispensable here, and I don't.
My goal is
wish
to
you
be
weren't.
ejected by the end of this episode. That's sort of the overall goal here.
I realize listeners didn't hear the bit that we chatted about before we started recording, where you
so
said
it just sounds like you're being
I
mean to
makes it
me.
where you said that you were the most dispensable, and now I'm calling back to that, and I'm realizing people might think,
Who is this guy that they've invited on? He's just ragging on
It's-
Jordan.
That's our connection.
Yeah.
We never talked about
man.
that either. They're age-old rivals, and that's just how they
Since
happen
the
to know
dawn
each
of
other.
time, Dan and I have just been circling. It's been a long
no,
time.
since we went to college together, and my career took off, and you ended up as a community college professor and a therapist, and I think that you're jealous of my success with my Fields Medal, right?
But
I knew
truly,
that
I
was
resent
familiar.
it all.
When
Yeah.
I was watching this movie, I was like, that sounds like somebody I know. I just can't place it.
This is going to end with us having a really charming exchange about going to get drinks right now.
Yeah, we
This
should have one
exact second.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
I think that's
Put it on my
I think
tab.
that's probably
I
good.
want to go ahead and follow the momentum here from Dan. Not necessarily, I'm not going to have the psychoanalysis momentum he does, but I will super dump, which
Sure.
is what I feel like I know better. I feel like I can super dump something.
Sure.
But he mentioned the TA. When I'm in a super dump situation on a movie that I think is phenomenal, usually I'm super dumping. I'm just trying to remove something that I feel like will only make the movie better. And it seems like what stood out to me is the TA feels completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think he would have been more necessary if he was funny. I think a lot of the times, especially in the 90s, we're talking late 90s, there's plenty of sidekick types.
Sure.
And I think technically, even though we don't have a true villain in this movie, I think Professor Lambeau, he is kind of he feels to me kind of a little bit like the antagonist in a way, because there's a certain selfishness here, but we kind of need to relate to everybody that's trying to pull Will in different directions. But
Right.
the TA doesn't need to be there at all.
Totally.
I don't think he brings anything. He didn't have any moments to me that were memorable. I forgot he was there. So when we talked about them sitting in on the hypnosis, in my mind, I only remembered just
just
3
Lambeau.
people in that room,
Yeah.
not 4. So
It feels
I'm
like
out.
it feels like there's supposed to be like an element of jealousy from that TA. Like the TA was the math prodigy before
Yeah.
Will, you know what I mean? And maybe that's in an earlier draft, but that's certainly
see it
not
enough,
here
yeah.
in the final text of the film.
So I'm gonna join you, Carter. The TA is also my super dump, but for one specific
Whoa.
reason. He is bad. Like the actor did a bad job as the TA. I don't think he brought anything to that role at all. In a movie full of, it seems like every single person has chemistry with everyone else on screen. You know, we talk a lot about the importance of chemistry and how much life it can bring to a scene, and how much an audience kind of relies on believing that 2 people actually know each other and actually can get along and actually do these things. And he is so flat. In a movie full of peaks, he is a valley. And he is my super dump for mostly that reason. But yeah, I also, I agree that it feels like they were setting him up to like turn in Will for not attending his
Sure.
sessions or something.
The dynamic it reminded me of that it felt like they were trying to aim for was, if we've watched 30 Rock, was Jack Donaghy's assistant Jonathan,
Totally.
who hates Liz.
Totally.
It totally felt like that's what we wanted out of this and did not do it.
Right.
yeah.
Okay, here's the argument for Todd the TA, though.
Okay.
Oh,
Because I'm not sure I agree, but I like what you're saying, but here's the counter argument. Is that by being kind of a milquetoast guy, he has no real personality. His whole life has built up to TAing for this Fields Medal guy, mathematician. And just like that, when Will Hunting shows up, a super charismatic and super talented guy who didn't try at all, now this guy who has no self, now he really has nothing. And if he were this charismatic, sort of bringing something to the table, then it would water down that juxtaposition where Professor Lambeau loves Will, not only for his ability, but also they have a little bit of a repartee because Will's funny and he's charming and stuff. So Todd being the guy with like the uncool glasses, you know, and like the polo shirt. I think it works. I think it's helpful, and it sets up. It also says something about Professor Lambeau, that's the kind of person that he would choose as his TA, who just kind of worships him and doesn't have a lot going on, and that he could abuse and just turn into a coffee errand boy.
Sure.
Once the shiny thing comes along. So that would be my counter argument for Todd.
I think that's totally
his name's
valid.
Todd.
He definitely needed like,
Feels like a Todd.
just a piece of like just paper hanging out with him while he's hitting on other, all these women all the time, so that they don't have any chance to glance the other way.
Oh my gosh, we got to talk about that at some point.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about it right after this, because it is so important to me that everybody acknowledges. Did anybody but me laugh out loud at Todd's reaction to Professor Lambeau tousling Will's hair after he solves the equation? Dude, the daggers that shot from this man's eyes were the funniest thing in this whole movie to me. That's the Todd I want on my screen. Should have been me.
I do think the most I laughed was when Will is leaving in a huff from Sean's office. He says, "F you," and then in like a quarter second, Sean says, "You're the shepherd."
Yes,
which is both a joke about f***ing things and f***ing use.
Oh,
That's
very good.
So good.
It's very
And I
good.
was like, oh, that
good.
I don't think I recognized just how like tight of a joke that was.
that's a
Robin
had to
Williams
be Robin.
thing. It's Robin,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
Gotta
Oh, yeah.
be
Totally.
Williams.
Had to be.
Okay, let's talk about how grody Professor Lambeau is.
Guys, that's my super
Guys,
dump. Now we've
okay.
all super dumped, but that's my super dump. Is
That's
how,
a better
like,
super dump,
how
actually.
how predatory Lambeau is in this, because these like it. I don't know. It's that same kind of thing. We do it in Indiana Jones too, where we play it as like, oh, he's this roguish professor and he knows he's handsome, but it's like, it's not cool then, and it's defo not cool now. It's so grody and creepy.
But it isn't just Lambeau, because when Will calls Minnie Driver and he doesn't say anything,
dude.
she says, "Is this Professor such and such again?"
100%.
So there's another professor in the
There's an
world of this
epidemic.
movie who calls hot students and breathes over the phone. That's the world we're living in.
Gracious.
Some of my like one eye trying to look away, one eye reading the trivia, the worst moments were, I mean, this was a Weinstein produced
Woof.
film.
Yes.
Woof.
Yep.
And there's like, he didn't think Minnie Driver was cute enough for the role, but Matt Damon and Ben Affleck had to fight for her to be in this role. Just the seediest, nastiest thing.
Man, that's gross.
Part of me is like, I'll go ahead and let's just credit to, Jabba the Hutt producing this film. But it's just like, yeah, that's so cringy. And it's just so disappointing how often that's been coming up.
And she's so good and so beautiful that it's
she
like,
is.
okay, hold on.
She's a couture. She was a couture model before she was an actor.
I just think like, what it really means is like she didn't him is really what it is.
Right. Yeah. She didn't put
Absolutely.
out, and so
Yeah.
he was not interested because
So she's not attractive enough. Yeah.
But
Piece of shit.
while we're on the subject of Minnie Driver, you want to talk chemistry and charm?
Oh my
dude.
goodness. Completely.
Well, there was a little bit of a love interest.
Was there
here
some
on
flingage?
set.
Was there?
Yes, Matt Damon and Minnie Driver during production.
Good for them.
How high is Matt Damon riding right now, guys? Like, him and Ben Affleck just get done weeping. One of my favorite things I read was that the two of them, one of the very first scenes they shot was Skarsgård and Robin Williams in the bar talking to each other. So they're watching these two big time actors doing the script that they've been working to try and put together for 5 years. And he said they're just weeping tears of joy. Lo and behold, who you've cast in this movie is legitimately interested in you. Wow. Much like in the script. So it's just, Matt Damon is, he was doing all right. The vibe of this movie in Good Will Hunting felt so much like another movie we did recently, Rocky. It just feels like this kind of like, what an amazing story.
Like the
an
movie
actual
itself
story of
is
how
the
movie-
underdog.
of how it is made, just for them to put that thing together. And I think part of that too, we talk about the chemistry and how much that means something. I think, if you know Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, even though they wouldn't do a ton of stuff together, very early in their career they did. And of course the chemistry is there because these guys are best friends. And so it's like every time they were on screen together, I didn't feel like I was watching a movie. I feel like we just kind of caught their conversation in South Boston, and that's just something that it's just a perfect storm. I don't think that could have happened with any other two people. It didn't, as much as they tried, right? Because this was going to be, this movie ends up making, I think, 20 times its budget.
Wow.
And there would have been rumors that it was going to be DiCaprio and Brad Pitt in this role, but they just kept fighting and saying, no, this is ours, much like a Sly Stallone would do in 1976. So super cool. I absolutely love that part of the film, just the actual making of.
Yeah, the tenacity. There's something about Boston that I find so endearing, just like as a city and the culture that surrounds it. There's a general sort of tenacity and attitude that you see portrayed in media out of Boston that I think you get out of the creativity from Matt and Ben for this movie that is so fun.
Yeah, it's nice to not also have blasted, and I lost my leg.
That's like The Departed.
That's true. Yeah, no drop kick Murphys in sight here, weirdly, which is...
Then you can't prove it's Boston.
That's a good point.
Is it Boston?
Have you guys thought at all about this movie and The Town, the other Affleck film, which is very Boston-centric? They rob Fenway. It's very much set in a friend group that is hyper-local. Again, I think it's Southie, but it's one particular neighborhood in South Boston where, all the bank robbers come from.
Yeah.
Charlestown, right. So it's that same, it's like a hyper-localized view of Boston from Boston. I'm just doing this in real time, but there's maybe some interesting stuff there.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Both great movies, both, hyper personal as well in their storytelling.
Also, a woman who's not from that world, right? So Affleck's love interest in The Town is not a local, right? Is that right? I could be
I don't remember.
misremembering that.
I've seen The Town once or twice.
I think
I
she
don't
is a
remember.
local. Blake Lively herself wasn't, and her accent work was like outstanding or something like that.
Blake Lively,
if I remember correctly.
No, Blake Lively is from The Town, is from their neighborhood. And then the other girl, the girl that he ends up like falling in love with or whatever, and lying about his friends and his life, similar to Will, lying about at least his background to this girl who's not from this town in Boston, this neighborhood of Boston. Right. There is some shared DNA, and it's super effective storytelling. It's one of those things like
Goodwill heisting.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm just gonna log off.
Killer.
That's good. There's something in that, like, people say a story is not universal unless it's particular or something like that. So the fact that, like, I don't know anything about South Boston. Like, I've probably been there. I don't know anything about it, but I can relate to these stories because they take that thing seriously and they do it justice.
This episode is so good. And I know that 100% because we're definitely not recording shout announcements before the episode. I know for sure the episode is going great right now. We're in the middle of it.
Can't not go great.
And you're loving it. Look, I know how much you're loving it, but I need the world to know how much you're loving it. So
don't hide it under a
favor.
bushel, folks.
No, let it shine. We are trying to get 300 reviews by our 4th birthday. It's all we want for our 4th birthday. That and a smash cake. That's too old for a smash cake, but I want it anyway.
I would take a smash cake for my next birthday is 28, and I would take a smash cake.
When I was a kid, I was supposed to smash my cake as a baby, and I got the icing between my fingers and started dry heaving. So, that's just sort of a little glimpse into what makes Jordan.
I want you to interpret this how you will. That tracks.
Yeah, no, I figured. But yeah, please go onto the Apple Podcast app. It's the only metric that counts, unfortunately. Go onto that app and leave us a review. We love 5 stars. I love a 5-star review. But I want you to be honest. Tell the world your honest opinion about us. It's one of the best ways that you can help us grow naturally and organically and spread the good word of Two Chunks. Another good way to do that is tell your friends. Send an episode. Send this episode to them. Just hit the little share button in your favorite podcast app and send it their way. I promise they'll love it, or maybe they won't. I can't be held legally responsible for that.
Something else I'd like y'all to do, if you're comfortable. There's a movie coming out, and it's going to be the next movie that we're reviewing. It's one of those big theater movies you've heard about.
I've heard of that.
It'd be fun to go to the theater for this. I know that the 3-4 of us are going to try and do that. But Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, we're about to be launched in one of those brand new worlds like Marvel likes to do often. And I'm really excited about it. And of course, because MCU is foundational to this podcast's creation, we're going to catch every single one of these big movies and these shows. So
Absolutely. Is that the comic bookist name we've gotten from Marvel so far? That's pretty dang comic booky.
You know,
it's
it might
super
be.
comic booky. Honestly, the Dark World, Thor to the Dark World is kind of comic booky too, but
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy as a whole is a very comic booky
that's
title
true.
of a group.
That's true. That's true.
But
That's
it's
a
up
good
there
point.
for
Shang-Chi
sure.
and the Legend of the Ten Rings is up there. And it is, I know at least for me, the beginning of my box office ball monies for this year.
I guess you should have picked up Jungle Cruise and Suicide Squad then.
Tell me about it.
Did you see Suicide Squad made like $7 million on its second weekend? What a drop off.
And Free Guy made like 30.
Oof.
Zing.
Zing. Well, listen, if you have been listening to this episode and you like us and our stuff, a great way that you can support us is by heading over to twochunksandahunk.com/Patreon and signing up for one of the 2 tiers we've got there. We've got a $3 tier where you get to listen to bonus episodes. We used to do them once a series. Now we do them once a when we can. But we're in the middle of reviewing Back to the Future right now. It's Carter's first watch through these 3 movies, and it's a great time over there. We're going to be recording part 2 soon, and that'll be hitting those bonus episode feeds.
Your shelves.
As soon as possible. Another benefit that you get at that tier is that you can vote twice in any open polls that we have. We do have a poll coming up this fall. Once the chill is in the air, you'll get to make your voice heard once again. And if you're a patron, you get to make your voice heard 2 different times. Your votes have double power, and historically over the past year, that's made a huge difference as far as
Like
what
a big
movies
difference.
actually make it onto the pod. And if
Their position. I mean,
Slash their position in the
We've talked
series.
about different movies. We've had different finale movie. Like
yeah,
the
it's a
patron
huge
vote
deal.
counts.
It's a huge deal. We also have a $5 tier over there where you get all those benefits plus access to our patron-only Discord channel. In the right now times that we live in where we're recording, we mostly fight about how much money Dune's going to make. But I'm sure 3 weeks from now when this releases, it'll all be beautiful conversations that make us all feel good about ourselves. And if you're listening to this episode and you, like me, are loving Dan, he's a great dude. Dan's got a ton of great stuff for you to check out. You should listen to his podcast, You Have Permission. Check out his music at Havana Swim Club on Spotify. Give him a follow on social media. Dan's an all-around great guy, and we love the content that he's creating. And now, back to the, like we say every time at the end of show announcements.
A word from our sponsors.
Now, back to the ad.
Can I do my what is it, pumps?
Please.
What is it?
Yeah, Superpump.
I've got 3, and they're tied.
Okay.
Ooh,
I love that.
Let's hear them.
The first is 2 lines of dialogue that goes, "This is Professor Lambeau. This is Professor Hayes," the janitor.
Oh, yes. That was so funny.
So good. That single line is so good.
Yes.
The entire economy of the Southern colonies bar scene.
Oh, my goodness.
I think, like, especially as a cerebral chunk, to use the terminology of this podcast.
Sure.
And I wasn't always such a chunk, but I thought of myself as one. There's something so romantic about like being able to win over the heart of a beautiful woman just by being smarter than someone else. Like, you don't have to actually win a fight or, like you just beat them in an argument. It's like the philosophy major's wet dream, basically, right?
Right.
For sure.
Exactly.
And so, and obviously it's just like an incredibly written scene. And then my third tie for Super Pump is Casey Affleck, guys.
He's so good in this, right?
This is buying low and early on Casey Affleck stock.
Totally.
He's so good with he has so little to do, but he's so good with it. Like every single scene, he is just on fire.
Absolutely on fire.
He's definitely my favorite sort of side player in the film.
Completely.
It feels like his entire direction was Ben Affleck being like, hey, just pretend we're kids again. Like, be mad at me like you used to get mad at me.
Yeah.
So he was
believable.
like, the rumors were, or what I had read, that he went more off script than Robin Williams. And I guess it's just going based off of a percentage.
Yeah.
But they were cracking up. A lot of the times the laughs that we see Casey getting are just his shots that he's just taking it.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think it
So
would be
good.
funnier to say, this is what I was using the mitt for, and things like that.
Yeah.
And they're just dying, and I absolutely love it.
No, I
That's
just
very
used
good.
it for the cleanup.
Yeah.
Such a good line.
Yes.
You know,
My super pump 100% I thought was going to just be Robin Williams, because he
I thought
tends
the
to just
same
be
thing,
that
dude.
for me. With Robin, I remember, so August 11th of 2014, I'm standing in my bedroom at the time, where I'm living with a bunch of guys in North Dallas, and my wife, who's only been my wife for about a year, but knows my affinity for movies, for characters, and of course, Robin, calls me as if I've lost a family member to tell me that he had died. I'll never forget. I wept. But so I very much thought he was going to be my favorite part, but I really don't think the movie is as poignant and as gripping as it is without Matt Damon's performance. I forget how phenomenal he's doing this. And it's one thing to, I think, just of anybody watching, to see, him spouting off, all that history in the bar, but then also, just I caught myself trying to do all his brothers, right? So that's impressive. That's impressive alone. But I think just the raw emotion, he kind of is very layered. I forget how much we see of his character and his personality in this movie. And I think it's even doubly impressive that this is like one of the first things he does, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
talk about bursting onto the scene. He would get an Oscar nomination for this in a leading role, and he's 27, kind of comes out of nowhere. And of course, the Oscar that we know that him and Ben get to share with the original screenplay. But yeah, just phenomenal work. Matt Damon is, I think, my favorite thing about this movie.
It's really good. And it makes sense. He sometimes your title character is not your title character because they're the strongest, but here, I mean, he really does go toe to toe with Robin Williams, and they both come out better for it, I think, in the scenes that they're sharing together. And something that on the train of things I thought might end up being super pumps but didn't. I just want to take a minute to appreciate Danny Elfman's soundtrack for this movie.
Oh, hey, it's so good.
Isn't that amazing?
It's something that it feels like it is in these moments where Will is having these epiphanies where he realizes that he can break old habits and old patterns in his life. It makes those moments feel like that soundtrack could also fit with NASA breaking the code to get to the moon. Like, it feels universal while we're watching this small thing happen to this person, but it feels like this enormous breakthrough. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get too romantic, but I definitely want to get too romantic about the movie. But it just feels like as Will is realizing that his funnel is widening, that there's more in front of him than the path that he has been on, that he can break habits and he can open himself up to relationship and to vulnerability and all these things. It feels like the soundtrack wants us to go, that is space. That is leaving the earth. Like, his feet are lifting up. It's just so good. And Danny is, I mean, I feel like I'm climbing up my own butthole a little bit here with how navel gazing I'm getting, but it's just how I felt about it, man. It's magical. It's a magical soundtrack for a relatively grounded movie.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to contrast the Elfman score with the Elliott Smith songs, which I think they use like 6 or 7 of them in the film. And the Elliott Smith stuff is more grounded. It's sad, but it's like romantic, sad indie
Like
folk.
melancholy.
Yeah, with a kind of an edge to it. And then the Elfman stuff is like, it's a little 90s in terms of some of the tonality of it, which I noticed this time and hadn't noticed before. But it's so interesting, and he's playing with such he's playing with such like, as a composer for the last 10 years for mostly commercial composer. So I haven't done many films, but like the type of dissonance that he's using and the type of chord structures are really unexpected. And I think that's what you're picking up on, this kind of like, it's a little bit fantastical, it's a little bit like otherworldly, which, it's this grounded movie about a guy in a particular neighborhood with a very common abusive blue collar background. And yet this music makes it sound like this is the guy who's going to get us to the moon. Right.
Right.
I think that's a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the universality of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that like the music serves to kind of clue us into, hey, maybe this is a bigger story than just this one guy who got out of Boston this one time. Maybe this is, I don't know. We're all climbing up our own butts at this point, but
hey, welcome in.
The music is sort of the key. It clues you into like, okay, this is the universality. This is the application of this, across all different kinds of, you can iterate it out however you like, depending on the specifics, but it's something relatable for all folks.
Which part of it is universal for you? Because there's obviously a lot of things that the various characters go through that we may go through as normies. But the sort of crux of all that drama is a super non-normal, once in 4 generations mind. So like a 1 in a billion mind or more.
Yeah.
And then that sets off like one of my favorite character studies is Professor Lambeau, where it's like he has built up his whole thing around being this, being this accomplished mathematician and getting this medal and using that, parlaying that medal to like sleep with 23-year-old students, which is actually really sad when you think about it.
Sure.
Compared to Sean's life, who married a woman that he loved and like stuck with her through cancer. Professor Lambeau is like a idiot by comparison.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But then to have him find Will, and there 2 things happen at once with Will. One is his whole thing comes crumbling down because there's someone better than him. But then we also hear him say that Sean is smarter than him too, and he knows it. But Sean didn't go that route. That's a little harder to believe that somebody would end up a really good therapist who could have been a Fields Medal mathematician. The people I know who are mathematicians would not necessarily make great therapists. But so that's one. But then on the other hand, he's really delighted by him, and he almost re-falls in love with math through Will. So I just think his character study that's really interesting, and that's kind of relatable, but Will's not relatable other than, maybe if I'd had a different kind of an upbringing, he would be in a sense, but he's so non-relatable in his main thing. But I don't know, maybe you guys think that doesn't make him not relatable. It actually makes it's like it's a parable, right? That he's so good that it's, know what I mean?
I think I would lean more that direction, that the universality comes from recognizing, hey, this is a story about realizing and activating latent potential and like finding like meaning making, basically like that kind of story.
Yeah.
Rather than, something hyper specific. I think you can broaden it out to be universally applicable.
Will is a superhero, right?
It's like hero's journey type of stuff, right? Like I'm never going to leave my village and return with a boon from the gods, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, he's written to be, I think, so over the top and unrealistically genius that you can almost put a blanket of anything you want over top of him and just go, this is a gifted person. But the giftedness isn't the issue. It's the sort of the inability to be vulnerable, inability to trust somebody with, for me at least, being able to identify with an unwillingness to put the potential to hurt me in somebody's hands, And I think that's there's something universal that you could take away from almost any aspect of just breaking old patterns and learning that there are other options than what you have always done. But yeah, I'm totally with you also, Dan. I think that there are, I hope, very intentionally written characters across the whole spectrum of this movie that people can look at and go, yeah, I mean, who hasn't felt that thing at least one time, or who hasn't been kind of in that situation?
I think outside of Will's superpowers, I feel like this movie kind of subtly works in extremes, because it's like because he is so extremely smart, like something we've never seen, we're really starting to see super accentuations of other people's emotions around him, right? I can't remember maybe the last time that Lambeau and Sean got in a big tiff, and I think it feels like the crux of it is, it's like when we're standing around the ring, right? Here's this big power.
Right.
What do we do with it, right? Will just comes in and they're like, I have no idea. I've never dealt with something like this before. Everything is combustible, because if we make one wrong move, he will be me. If I make this move, he'll be me. And so like the relatability there is everyone is seeing themselves in someone who is just supernatural.
It's good.
And so it's the fun juxtaposition of like, yeah, it is a fun conversation that we brought up the universality, because I think while I feel one way right now, I could feel a different way about it in about 5 minutes. And I think that's what makes it so special, and kind of how we've been talking about the soundtrack too, and how that kind of connects in such a great way. I love when the describing words of the composition of the music are ways that I would just describe the making of the film, like otherworldly, unexpected. There's so many things that are happening that just start to line up. And that's kind of why I had that comparison to Rocky earlier, is it just feels like this tall tale of a process that this movie even ends up happening.
Sure.
Because it wasn't just Robin Williams and Skarsgård that were a big deal that decided to jump on. It's like everybody are going around these two kids whose combined age is a middle-aged man, right? and they're saying like, let's freaking do it. These guys, there's a great story about how I think somehow this script got into Coppola's hands, Francis Ford Coppola's hands, and that's how Robin Williams got a hold of the script. And he's blown away, but his first question is, who the hell are these guys?
Right.
Right.
Like who did this? Right? And so I think that's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are like meta.
They are Will a little bit,
Yeah.
right? It's
People
like
in
almost
Hollywood
autobiographical.
being like, "Oh shoot, what do we do with this?"
Yeah.
Okay, but that
Like, this is
leads
gonna be-
that leads to this question I want to ask you guys that I'm almost afraid to ask, because it would implicate me if the answer is yes. Is this ultimately a anti-blue collar, white collar film?
Ooh.
Interesting.
The scene where Ben says, don't do it for you, do it for me. It's an insult to us for you to not get out of here. And I recognize that there are surely blue collar people who feel that way about their kids, for instance. Like, this is a very common narrative in American lore, is that I laid brick so that my kid could go to college and get a better job. And there is dignity in the blue collar work, but like in the end, they're all kind of like, yeah, like you should go get a job at a think tank and be a white collar, because that's obviously better inherently. And maybe it's just because it gives you money and a chance to do things, and that's more innocuous. I guess the counter argument as I process this would be that a lot of white collar people are not get their comeuppance in this film. Professor Lambeau, Todd the TA, Southern colonies douche from the bar. There's plenty of shit given to the white collar sort of Ivy League world.
Sure.
But ultimately, it's what Will has to do, not just to get Minnie Driver, but also to like go get his white collar job. And but again, he's a superhero. So maybe that gets it off the hook of being ultimately kind of white collar apologetics, which Matt and Ben went to go become actors and writers, right?
Yeah. Is it a pretty safe assumption that he goes back to the white collar job? Because I remember like the end essentially is him. Is he not accepting it yet, or is he just not accepting it to go get Minnie?
My guess is he eventually takes a job like that and uses his
mine
brain.
Too.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Well,
Maybe it's
an interesting
Stanford.
question.
Maybe, guys, it's 1999. Maybe he's involved in the tech boom. Maybe he invents Twitter 5 years earlier. I don't know.
Amazing.
Jack who? It's Will.
It's Will
now.
It's Will.
It's Will.
At
man.
Will
Will.
the whole time.
Well, I think it's a really great question. It's not something that I had considered. I would say that I think the viewpoint that the script was written from has to be considered when asking that question. And it's two young white men in the 90s who are inherently going to come, even if their history is blue collar in the city of Boston with their families, there's an inherent privilege that comes from being two young, ambitious white men in the 90s who get to write a script and put it somehow in the hands of Francis Ford Coppola and Robin Williams. So I would say that there is probably at least a distaste for the blue collar work between the two script writers. But I never got the vibe from where I was watching. I never got the vibe that there was a looking down the nose. I can't think of a better phrase for that. It didn't feel like the script was looking down the nose at blue collar work so much as saying that Will's mind deserves to be pushed and explored and allowed to run free.
Yeah.
But it's a great question. And actually, I'm glad that we got to walk there. My super pump for this movie is the script itself, which feels like a cop-out when you're like, my favorite thing is all of it.
Is the movie. All the words they wrote for the movie.
They're so good when I hear them.
Those are my favorite.
No, man. The writing for this movie, just and I guess maybe my caveat, my asterisk here is it's the script and the unscripted moments that we're allowed to breathe.
Sure.
Okay, now you're really cheating. You got to pick one or the other.
It's all of it. It's the whole thing, and
It's
also
everything
the way
they
it
wrote
looks
and everything
sounds.
they didn't write.
Everything they did right. My super pump is the film Good Will Hunting.
I love that. I love
Just
that.
loved,
We've come
just
close to stuff
loved
like
it.
that before.
I'm telling you, this podcast has 2 hosts by the end of this night. I am out. No, I really, really love our story, our dialogue, the moments that we get, even the aggression between Minnie Driver and Matt Damon when she's saying like, if you tell me you don't love me, I'm done and I'll go. It just feels it feels like somebody's had that breakup before that wrote this script, you know? And I just find it's that perfect needle thread of believable enough for me to watch it and go, yeah, makes sense. But fantastical enough for me to watch it and not go, ooh, it hurts too much. It's too real. And it just makes this perfect line that this movie walks for my tastes and my sensibilities. That the script was, by the time I finished, the script was the only option for Superpump for me. It's very nearly a perfect script.
Did you see any of the stuff on William Goldman in this?
I didn't.
So William Goldman, playwright, screenwriter, he did like All the President's Men, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, won Oscars for those, wrote The Princess Bride, right? So he's at a big seminar. Yeah, the novel. Okay. He's at a big seminar and he's talking about how he gave Rob Reiner this to read. And there had been rumors that essentially Goldman had he's actually the writer of Good Will Hunting, right? To like take away, but he completely shuts that down. He says, no, not at all. Now, they did approach him. So Damon and Affleck come to him. And at the time, he had the recommendation to kind of be like, why don't you lean into more of the beautiful stuff about this in terms of the relationships and stuff like that? Because at that time, they thought it was going to be like someone was trying to get Will to do FBI like stuff. Kind of a shot back at that as the NSA that they put back into the film. But Goldman says something that was kind of sad about it is we don't really see these two write much anymore after their career. And he's kind of longingly saying like, you know, it's much easier to go be an A-list actor.
Sure.
And it pays better.
Wow.
Right? But, you know, he talks about the wrestling of this 5-6 years that they were trying to get this script pushed, much less write it. And so it is so much to do with the writing. And I think that's kind of the melancholy, that's kind of what's sad about it, is that we don't really see these guys do it again.
Yeah.
They did Dogma together maybe, but after that it wasn't. There's just not much else.
Yeah.
But yeah, the writing is just...
They didn't write Dogma, did they? That's Kevin Smith.
Oh, you're right. Is it? Yeah.
And Kevin Smith is a producer on this film. I saw his name in the credits. Yeah. Well, here's my final comment on the film as we near time. Eating caramels is not as arbitrary as drinking coffee.
Agreed.
And here's why. Eating a bunch of sugar does not do the same thing as drinking caffeine does for you. There's a reason that caffeine facilitates conversation and ideas is because it is a stimulant. And sugar is not really a stimulant in the same way. You get a little peak of energy, then you crash, which you don't want to happen on a date. And now I'm stealing from Michael Pollan's new book, Your Brain on Plants or something, and that coffee houses were started as all male, basically like philosophy clubs that like men would go to debate ideas. And that was where you like wanted to get an idea circulating so that it would like find purchase, was a coffee house. So it's not arbitrary will. And the fact that you think so means you're one peg short of a full board.
Yeah.
He's an idiot.
If
You heard
I
it here first.
invited
Will
Will's
Hunting
an
is
idiot.
dumb.
If I invited someone to coffee and they were like, or we could get caramels, it's basically the same thing, I'd be like, you know what? I'm actually
All right,
good.
never mind.
I'm actually all set.
Yeah, I'm wrong. I actually am busy that day. I forgot.
We are nearing the end of our time together. Before we do that, I do want to ask a quick question, Dan.
Okay.
My therapist, who I love very much, he's fantastic. He told me on my first session, if I see, he takes my privacy very seriously, and he told me if I see you out in public, I won't even look at you.
Yeah.
To which I said, I'm going to look at you. I hope that's cool. I don't mind.
Yeah.
But he wanted to make sure. In your opinion, the relationship, and I know we got into this a little bit at the beginning, but the phone calls, the going on the walk and taking things outside of the office, is that something that feels within the realm of okay to you? I just don't know. I'm unfamiliar with what's okay and what isn't.
Yeah, I would say that what they portray in the film is not a betrayal of client confidentiality. What
Sure.
your therapist is saying is like I will never say hi to a client if I see them in public. They are welcome to say hi to me. I have a few clients. I intern at a clinic right now. They are welcome to say hi to me, and they can tell their friends that I'm their therapist if they want, but I'll never divulge any of that out of my own mouth. And in fact, I have like a Facebook group with patrons of the podcast, and a handful of them are my clients, and I tell them the same thing there. I will never sort of comment to you as if I'm your therapist. Like, you're welcome to say what you want, but that's just like, I won't do that. And so, yeah. And you can, some people do go for walks. I mean, there are concerns about if people can overhear you. You
Sure.
might like the nerdy stuff is that you might need to like write a little note why you did it and like sort of give a reason for it and explain that there weren't people that would overhear it. But yeah, there's like, there's like recreational therapy. People do therapy on hikes or at a gun range or at
equine therapy or whatever.
equine therapy, so yeah, it's within the realm of possibility. Him giving him his answering machine, that's perfectly reasonable. Clients can have a way to reach you, but it's generally frowned upon to like be texting with them a bunch or,
Sure.
doing therapy over the phone when it's not a session, unless it's a real emergency, that type of a thing.
Interesting.
I'm glad that we were able to end the podcast on like some super entertaining stuff about confidentiality and ethics.
I think it's
Man,
the
that
most
makes me happy
entertaining
to hear,
thing.
though, because the relationship of Will and Sean is my super pump for this movie.
Yeah,
It's
look at that.
just fantastic. It's just fantastic. And
is.
particularly, I do want to zero in on Robin Williams. Legend says that she farts in her sleep whole thing was improv by
Wow.
Williams.
No, it definitely
Whoa.
Like
is.
landing all the way through, like the cameraman's
Wow.
laughing, the shot is shaking.
The camera's shaking.
Yeah, Williams is improving all of this all
Unreal.
the way through the landing where he says, and she's been dead 2 years, and that's the shit I remember. Holy crap, you guys.
Wow.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
It is.
she was the
this
best.
is not our first. This is not our first Robin Williams movie. Of course, this kind of thing happens when you have a movie podcast for 4
Yeah.
years. You're bound to just shotgun and hit like 5 good Robin Williams movies. But to show the significance of how much this performance stands out among many for him is that bench where he does have a lot of time with Will ended up becoming organically just a memorial to Robin Williams
Wow.
after his death
Wow.
in Boston. That this was the place where people were just putting letters and writing all these things to put around
So
that bench,
cool.
and has since become nominated and to have an actual statue put up of
Goodness
his character
gracious.
right there in memoriam. So
That's great.
yeah, it was a significant
Wow.
role for a lot of people.
That's great. That's really awesome. It is time to rate this movie officially on the Two Chunks and a Hunk scientific cinema scale created in-house at our own test kitchens. It's perfect, and it is as follows.
I've heard people say it's so smart that even Will couldn't come up
He
with
couldn't
it.
figure it out, dude.
That
That's
we had to
crazy.
do
Wow.
it for him.
had to do it
It's
for him.
crazy. I can't believe it.
Now, the best thing we could ever say about a movie, of course, is own it, don't lend it. Buy that poster. The next best thing is buy it. That's followed by rent it and then stream it. After that is forget it. And last, but certainly least, the worst thing we could ever say about a movie.
God hath forsaken us.
I'm going to go first. I don't usually go first on the ratings, but I'm going to do it because
Appreciate you stepping out. Like
you know,
that.
it's my last
Wow.
show, so I just want to go out with a bang. I'm buying the poster for Good Will Hunting because of course I am. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a slam dunk movie. It's so perfect for me. I love it. If you want to know why I'm buying the poster, go listen to the first entire podcast we just recorded. It's so good. Poster for me, easy.
This is going to be a poster for me as well. You heard it here first. Breaking news on Two Chunks and a Hunk. Good Will Hunting is a very good movie.
Hey, it might even be Great Will Hunting.
It might even be great Will Hunting.
Oh my
Don't
gosh.
sell yourself short. Yeah.
I'm also going to buy the poster, and I think even though some moments are super cerebral, I don't think you necessarily have to follow along with that closely to appreciate this movie. It's the kind of movie that I think I would recommend to just about anybody, and have a pretty good chance of them not hating it.
Sure.
I think people would really enjoy the process. But yeah, buy the poster.
You know, it's hard to be a guest in this aspect because I don't have any movie posters. I do own
Sure.
movies,
Figure.
and I own this movie. So literally, I own it. But I'm gonna give you a reason why, for the sake of the rating, I'm gonna bump it up to buy the poster.
Okay.
And that's because, and I was thinking about how to say this as we were talking. The film does a really good job of two things at once. So if you are a 22-year-old college kid who thinks that because he is reading Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, that he knows how bullshit everything is or whatever, then you identify with that speech that Will gives.
Right.
If you are the 50-year-old, adult who remembers that phase of your life and knows that there was stuff missing, then you can latch on to that Robin Williams responds to that by calling bullshit on him.
Sure.
And it really lets them both sit side by side. And I don't think that it ever totally says that Will was full of shit. I think
Right.
he's on to something, and it valorizes him enough that gets some credence. That's a really cool tightrope. It makes me think of a show that my wife and I are watching right now called The White Lotus on HBO.
Yes.
Which
I'm about to start.
just
that.
it's
finished.
so good.
excited.
And one of the families, the Connie Britton, Steve Zahn family, they're talking about privilege and race and who gets a chance to speak and all this stuff. And the different characters like voice different perspectives that like people in America would voice right now.
Yes.
I guess people broadly on the left. There's nobody doing like a Trump thing, but like you can then kind of play around yourself in the interplay between the different things that they're saying. And it's just masterfully done. And that's what I thought of during that scene on the rewatch for Good Will Hunting. So in my very long, of course, this is very me to just talk more than any of you guys on your podcast.
You're the guest, though.
Is that how guests work? I guess, yeah.
You are the hunk.
I sometimes talk as much as my guest on my podcast, which is a flaw. Try not to, but yeah. So it's by the poster. It's by the poster for me. Although
I think that's great.
no, it's good. Yeah, I want the main poster of Will and Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It always helps when it's a good poster too. That helps make
Right.
things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Well, that is
Posters all around.
That is the end. Yeah, we're ending on a posters all around with an even fourth poster from our wonderful guest host Dan.
Surprise
Coming in.
Guys, 3
and
posters
slam
and a
dunking.
poster.
It's so
Can't
good.
even believe it.
Wow.
New podcast.
Well, that closes out our Matt and Jack do therapy, but do it real bad series that we never officially named for some reason.
No, that's it. That
it
could be
rolls
it.
off
That
the
works.
tongue, which is great. But
Easy.
that does close us out. And of course, next week we will be reviewing Shang-Chi, coming at you hot from the MCU presses, straight from their beautiful bakery.
I heard it's really similar to this,
Yeah.
actually. Weirdly
Yeah.
enough.
I have
It's not
heard
even
it
going to be
too.
a tonal difference really at all.
Yeah, I hardly
this and Les
recognized
Mis, I
Ben
think.
Affleck
It's gonna be interesting.
in the trailer.
Yeah.
But before we close down shop for this episode, Dan, for those that don't want to rewind and do the hard work themselves, do you have anything that you want to plug here right now at the very end?
Oh yeah, sure. If you want, you can listen to You Have Permission. It's not about movies. It's about Christianity in the modern world.
We
And
do have a great episode about movies, Christian movies.
that's a
that
fun
I listened
episode.
to.
Yeah, I interviewed.
It is a
Loved
good
it,
one.
yeah.
I interviewed the guys who made Faith Based, which is a indie comedy that I think is on Prime Video still, where it's a buddy comedy about guys who try to make some money by writing a Christian film and starring in it.
Yeah,
And it's a pretty funny movie. It definitely was a fun
it is.
conversation with them. And I also had Luke back on the show recently to do a conversation about why he's not a Christian. I do that sometimes. Like their episode's called "I Don't Believe in That God," and just kind of hear people's stories and compare, contrast my own faith with their whatever it is that they lack faith in. And it's so sometimes interesting to. This feels like so wrong and different for your show. Like, who's gonna want? Who
No,
like
you
this
have-
is gonna want that? You know.
95%.
Yeah, I think
Like,
almost most.
If I had a podcast about bicycles or something, like that would be cool. Or
Promise
caramels.
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
The Caramel Podcast.
Well, Dan, I think you inadvertently just gave us our perfect closing. But before we do that, I do just want to say again from all of us here at Two Chunks, thank you, man. This was great.
100%.
Yes,
This was awesome.
thank you.
We really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
your time and hanging out with us and your actual source of expertise in a subject that none of us have, which is great.
Can you imagine us just farting our way through this?
Dude, and I like
think it
the
was
part.
good.
I like the part where
Yeah.
they were nice to each other. That part was cool. But to end today's episode, I would like for each of us to say our first and last name and reveal how we pronounce the word Caramel.
Oh, divisive.
I know it. I know it. For Two Chunks and a Hunk, my name is Jordan Wonders. I think I say caramel, but I think it's contextual for me. I would say caramel apple, but I would call the candies caramels.
Ooh,
Mull that over.
interesting.
Is it?
I'm Doge, and I have made a principled effort in my life to replace every caramel with caramel.
Interesting.
I'm making an effort on that pronunciation front.
I'm making no effort because it doesn't really define me. I'm Carter, and I just say caramel.
Okay.
I don't care what you
Good for
think.
you, man.
The person who is judging me for saying caramel.
So freaking brave over here.
I'm Dan, and I thought I maybe said caramel because of the film, but I just thought about salted caramel, which is
Ooh, yeah.
usually
Ooh.
where I say it, and so it's caramel.
Good point. Wow.
Yeah, salted caramel.
Salted
Feels
caramel
so
feels
weird
bad.
coming out of my mouth.
If you
tastes
say
bad
if
to
you
say.
say salted caramel, I'll punch you in the face right in front of me.
Do it. I'm glad we're
Anybody.
over Zoom. I'm glad we're over Zoom because I say that
Makes
and
you
it
feel
sounds
safe.
smart as hell.
Yeah, I'd like a kid scoop of salted caramel. I'm leaving. I'm getting out of the shop. I don't want to be near you.
And we're back with breaking news. The new Coke Zero Sugar might be the best Coke ever.
That's right, Jim. With an improved taste and 0 calories, make sure... Jim,
Ooh, yes, this tastes like the best Coke ever to me.
we're on the air.
I need to try it first.
Con cero azúcar y ahora mucho más rica. ¿Será que la nueva Coca-Cola Zero Sugar es la mejor de todas? Descúbrela.
Meyer brand lunches keep kids fueled for back to school. Start with a wholesome sandwich made with our honey-roasted deli-sliced turkey breast and provolone slices on Meyer's split-top wheat bread. Add a side of fruit with Meyer applesauce squeezable pouches. Treat them at school, after school, or anytime with assorted fruit-flavored snacks. And pack it all up fresh and neat with Meyer brand sandwich bags and napkins. Discover big taste and bigger savings when you go back to school with Meyer brand.